Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. I am Kristen Boyce, a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice, Pathways to Healing Counseling. Through conversations, education, strategies, and shared stories, we will be closing the chapter on all the thoughts, feelings, people, and circumstances that don't serve you anymore and open the door to possibilities and the real you. You won't want to miss an episode, so be sure to subscribe. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. So there are some episodes that just kind of pull you in based on the guests I'm having on the podcast. And this week's episodes, we're actually doing a two-part series on this one. So we're going to have two parts because it's so compelling. And I really want you to hear the story of how to break out of a cult. If you've heard of Scientology, my guest really dives into his story on how he got into Scientology. He's second generation of Scientology, which means his parents were in it. How that mind control and lack of any other information that you're given create this really black and white thinking, good, bad, right, wrong, polarizing thinking, and how that plays into control and manipulation. And it's really a powerful story. Let me tell you a little bit more about my guest. Chris Shelton is a former second generation cult member of Scientology who escaped in 2013. He worked for Scientology for 25 years. And we talk about his story, how he got into that, what that was like, what happened during that time. Since leaving, he's achieved getting his master's in psychology of coercive control. In his new book about cult recovery, summarizing lessons about what he's learned over a decade called What Now is out. He also has an original book, and I'm going to link both books below on his story of Scientology. It was really powerful. I recommend listening to both episodes so you can get the full story and how he recovered. And we could have talked longer because it was so much to share and cover. And really how he broke free and what shifted his mindset. Because when you're in a cult and when you're in an environment like that, you're not exposed to really other thoughts and ideas because you believe this is how you're going to save the world. And this is what we talk about in this podcast interview. Grab the journal if you're doing your own work. And I want to cheer you on in that. Grab it at kristendboyce.com/free resources. We'll also link that in the show notes because each episode, I hope, shifts something in your thinking, in your mindset. That is my hope for this podcast and really, truly transforming how you feel about yourself. So without further ado, here is my impactful conversation with Chris Shelton. Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. I am so grateful you are joining me for an episode that I have never talked about this subject, which is shocking because we're over 300 and I don't even know the number we're on. We're at a lot of episodes. And this is an important topic that we've never covered and needs to be talked about. And Chris Shelton, welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast to unpack what it's like to recover from a cult.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being here and telling your story. So the audience loves, my listeners love to hear a story, your personal story. How did you get involved with a cult? It might sound like I'm saying the Colts, the Indianapolis Colts. I'm not. I'm saying CULT because I live in Indianapolis. Tell us about your story.
Great. Yeah, no problem. I was actually raised in Scientology. My parents got involved when I was about 3 or 4 years old. So all of my living memories have Scientology in it as part of growing up. And it's really not any different as far as how the belief system is sort of put on you and stuff than anybody raised in a religious household. I was raised in a fairly extreme religious household because Scientology is a pretty extreme set of beliefs and ideas. And its organization is pretty authoritarian and what we call totalist. So like every part of my life had Scientology in it. It wasn't just going to church on Sundays. Scientology offers a way of studying. So it was in my schoolwork. It offers a way of physical healing. So there was this kind of laying on of hands thing that you could sort of compare it to as I grew up. There are ideas in Scientology that when you are injured or sick, you shouldn't be saying things or making noises because those noises are recorded by a part of your mind that is not so great. So I grew up a little afraid of my mind, a little afraid of the world, and a little bit weirded out by how different I was from everybody else. I was having a public school experience growing up. This was out in California. So I was raised in Los Angeles and Pasadena and was having what looked like a normal childhood, except for the imposition of L. Ron Hubbard in every aspect of my life. And so I ended up believing things that were a little odd. I believed in a spiritual existence, which is not odd, but a very, very specific kind. I believed I was an immortal spiritual being who had lived life after life after life, because this is what my parents explained to me, that this life was really just kind of like the latest suit of clothes I was wearing. My body is like something you have. It's not who you are. It's more something that you're wearing. And that informs a lot of very interesting ways of thinking about the world, even as a child, thinking of concepts like immortality and morality is very, very big in Scientology. So there was a lot of moral sort of rules, you could say. And I always felt a little odd man out. I always felt a little different, a little separate from everybody else. And I was bullied as a child. And so I would try to bring my Scientology to bear to try to fight the bullying. And that never worked or helped in any way. And I kept being told that Scientology was the thing that was going to make the world better, that everybody needed Scientology, that it was something that lacking Scientology, that's why the world was so crazy. That's why wars happened. That's why criminals were criminals, because we just didn't have enough Scientology in the world. And so when I actually started partaking in Scientology at 15 years old, when my dad said, "Hey, why don't you go down to the church and find out for yourself what this is all about, instead of just having us explain it to you or using it here at home," I went down to the church. And this was now in Santa Barbara, California, where we had moved. And 15 years old, I'm a nerdy, geeky, very bookish kid. I had my nose in a book all my life. I was a very, very avid reader. And I guess I was smart, but I lacked what you would call street smarts. I did not have a lot of worldly experience. Who does at 15 years old? And so they wrangled me right in. I was prepped, you could say. I was primed to believe in all of the things that they were going to tell me. And I did. And the way you go into Scientology, or the way a lot of people are introduced into it, is it's mostly about, I came to learn years later, about 75% of people who get involved in that group do so because friends or family bring them in and introduce them to it. I didn't just walk by randomly on the street. And I did that personality test that they give you. And it's a 200 question test that you basically serves to get, for them, you answer these questions and you get this graph that's supposedly scientific. It's not, but it looks very scientific, and it's got all these lines and columns and stuff. And it was basically my personality laid out on a piece of paper, according to Scientology's estimation of how personality works. They have very funny ideas, by the way, about all that. So it's not psychology oriented at all. They're very anti-psychology. So I use these words like personality test and throw around words like identity and stuff. But in Scientology, these have very, very different ideas from psychology. That test basically opened me up and got me to open up and tell them about myself personally, very, very intimate stuff. And in hindsight, it really wasn't that hard to figure me out at 15 years old. I was desperate for dates, couldn't talk to girls, struggling in school, all the usual 15-year-old boy stuff. So I thought I was keeping it all under control and under the lid and everything. And she was just like, "Oh, so it looks here like you have a hard time talking to girls." And I was like, "How did you know?" You know, this kind of thing, right? How could you have such insights into my character and difficulties in my life, right? They were just reading me like a little book, right? So I couldn't sign up fast enough, because what they do is the personality test is a sales gimmick to get you to open up about what it is you are feeling weak or not feeling good about yourself. And then they offer you a class or counseling, which they call auditing, to solve that problem. They go, "Oh, well, here's your problem, but we know exactly how to deal with that. We know exactly what to do. If you take this communications class, you'll never have a problem with girls again. And I was like, oh my God, shut up and take my money,
Yeah.
right? Couldn't sign up fast enough. And that's how I basically became a Scientologist. And once I started, I didn't stop. Again, also was very, very primed for it. So I did a communications class. I did a study class. This was all during the summer between my sophomore and junior years of high school. Very, very impressionable years. And I was so set up. And all of these adults at the church were friendly, warm, caring. They looked like they actually cared about me. They said how smart I was and how tuned in I was and how above average I was just by the fact that I was there. We call this love bombing.
Oh, yeah. You feel
Right?
seen and heard and wanted and needed and valued. That pulls you into this trust factor.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
I did trust these people because they were the only adults. I mean, my teachers weren't talking to me like this. No other adult in my life seemed to ever show me respect.
It met a need.
Oh, a huge,
Mhm.
huge need. And in fact, that's exactly what I align now when I explain Scientology recruitment or cult recruitment in general. It's all about finding and fulfilling emotional needs. Exactly. And boy, did I have them. I mean, who doesn't
Does it?
when we're
Yeah.
teenagers? We're flailing about. We have no idea what these hormones and social networks and the world and the confusions and the demands, it's all just a mess for us. So here was a real anchor. Here was a real stable place that said, we have the answers. We're going to hook you up. We're going to take care of you. And you're an awesome person. And we're going to make you more awesome. You just, like I said, you couldn't take my money fast enough. So I committed and I really went for it. And over the next 2 years, while I continued and finished high school, I was also doing Scientology classwork on the weekends. And I'd go down to Santa Barbara and just be there all weekend. So, or it was Sunday nights and Monday and all day Sunday, Monday nights, and Tuesday nights. That was what I was going down there to do. They want you connected up for 15 hours a week at least. If they can get you for more, they want more. But that was kind of the minimum they were putting on me. So I proceeded forward. I did an ethics class. I did more study classes. I learned how to use, for some of you might have seen or heard, that electronic device they use in Scientology called an electropsychometer or an e-meter. This is something they use in their auditing process to sort of read your mind. I've since done videos breaking down how all of this is nonsense and doesn't work. But at the time, it felt empowering. It felt interesting. It felt like I was getting a line in on knowledge that nobody else had. And so I had a leg up over everybody else. And 17-year-old me really needed that
Mhm.
because I had, like I said, I'd been bullied. I felt weak and ineffective compared to other people. And I was constantly comparing myself to other people. The other thing
Didn't
I
feel good
didn't
enough.
know,
So here you
it-
go, just trying to make you feel worthy.
exactly. And what
Mhm.
I didn't know as well, a hidden disability this entire time was that I have ADHD. And Scientology doesn't recognize or acknowledge any neurodiversity or psychological or psychiatric conditions. They believe that all of psychology and psychiatry have no idea what they're talking about, are completely false subjects. And therefore, that's what I thought. So I never, ever connected up with ADHD or neurodiversity and had to use Scientology concepts to explain why I had emotional dysregulation or felt nervous or felt this or felt that around people, or why my attention was sometimes all over the place, right? You get very interested in this and then you're very interested in this. And sometimes when you don't know what ADHD is all about, that can look a little weird. And I didn't know what ADHD was and I didn't know what it looked like. So Scientology offered all kinds of other answers to that. They have, for example, they have in that communications class I did, they have these drills, these practical exercises you do where you sit in a chair and stare at somebody for 2 hours. And this is supposed to get you mindful and get you comfortable sitting in a chair across from somebody else, confronting them. And I don't know that there's anything more painful for somebody with ADHD than to sit still for 2 hours,
Yes.
right? In practicing this, it's a 2 hour. The standard is you have to pass perfect 2 hours, no moving around, fidgeting, nervousness, giggling, nothing. You just have to sit there. And it took 25 hours before I could do that for two, right? So you're practicing this. And that creates its own levels of psychological suggestibility and trance states and all kinds of psychological nonsense was going on with those exercises that I had no idea. I didn't know anything about any of that stuff. So it was just a struggle session. That's what it felt like, right? A big struggle session. And eventually you learn to comply and conform and go along with what the group's telling you to do because these people seem to know what they're talking about. And I knew inside I didn't know what I was talking about. So here's something to be certain of. Well, after high school, I wanted to go be a writer and I wanted to follow in the footsteps of Stephen King, right? This is 1987. I graduate high school and I'm going to be the next Stephen King. And I was a writer. I'd done story writing. People liked my stories. It wasn't just, oh, Chris, you're so cute. I seemed to have some talent in this. But Scientology was like, no, actually, what you should do is you should save the world with us. Is writing books. Anybody can write books. Is Stephen King doing anything to save the world? Is Stephen King really doing anything to improve the lot of man? We are. You should join us. And it was a convincing argument. And after 3 days of back and forth being recruited to join the Church of Scientology as a staff member and work for the church, I was like, all right, let's do it. Because again, I was being very, very heavily love bombed. The love bombing that happened before just to get me to sign up was nothing compared to what they really poured on when they wanted me to join them and work for them and really dedicate my life to it. And working for the Church of Scientology is religious volunteerism. You don't get paid. You don't get anything. There's no benefits. There's nothing. So I was very naive and was not thinking clearly about any of that. Even as Scientologists, my parents were like, don't really know that you know what you're doing here. Well, there's nothing to tell a 17-year-old boy from your parents than to disagree with you to get you to do it faster, right? So I was like, yes, sign me up now, right? Because my parents don't want me to do this. So I signed up and I started working for the church. 8 years in Santa Barbara at the Church of Scientology there. I put in 8 years of work. I did a teacher role mainly. The classwork they do is sort of an open enrollment. Every student in the classroom is kind of on their own. What's called a check sheet. And you go through the check sheet and that's what gets you through the classes. It's not a classroom situation where everybody's moving forward on the same material at the same speed. So I learned how to supervise Scientology classwork. And they recruited me, in fact, on the basis that I would be trained in Los Angeles on this special program they needed to send somebody down for. And I was going to be one of the best supervisors on the planet. So again, status, love bombing, sign me up. I need this. I really, really need this. I need this acknowledgement. I need this feeling of usefulness. I need this feeling of certainty that I'm important and special. And boy, Scientology was serving it up in spades. So I did this supervisor role and I eventually kind of rose up the ranks a little bit within the organization and became an executive in charge of all of the auditing and all of the training that we were giving people. And Santa Barbara was a tiny little church. It wasn't really, as far as churches of Scientology goes, it was a pretty tiny place. We had maybe 150 active Scientologists through the entire Santa Barbara, Ventura County area. So pretty small. And our goal was to make it bigger, get everybody on. We were responsible for our geographic zone. So everybody in the town, everybody in the county was our responsibility. And that's how we thought about it, was we thought everybody's a Scientologist, they just don't know it yet. So we're going to wrangle them in and convince them, just like I was convinced, and we're going to get them on board and we're going to turn them into kind of like gods. We're going to become immortal spiritual beings. We're going to become like these amazing versions of ourselves. We're going to transcend all the limitations of the physical universe. That's how we would talk. And we believed we had a method to do that, which was the auditing. And some of the auditing at the lower levels is very, very easy to understand. And I could get my head around it and it made a lot of sense. And the upper levels are confidential. Get to know what's on them until you get to them. And you have to get permission from the church to get there. Those are called the OT levels. And we don't have to get into all the terminology today. There's a ton of it, and it's kind of ridiculous. I'll try to keep it to a minimum. Scientology literally has 2 dictionaries this thick, full of language that they have created or modified for their own purposes. And that's part of the cult experience. I've come to learn that's part of any group that is engaging in kind of thought reform techniques will come up with their own specialized language that's a little twisty. And Scientology language is very twisty. It's very, very specialized. I'll give you an example. And in fact, this was a key part of my growing up and part of my becoming part of Scientology was hinged on this word, responsibility. They have a very special definition of responsibility in Scientology. It's not simply what you're causing or what you can be blamed for. It's you are responsible for everything in your life. Ultimately, you have pulled into you problems, issues, chronic illnesses, any kind of physical problem or issue you have, any kind of chronic mental condition or phenomena you're experiencing. Basically, at the end of the day, it's all on you. And it is not karmic. It's kind of karmic adjacent. It's more of you are basically a good little spiritual entity. They call the word for this in Scientology is thetan, from the Greek letter theta. You just add an N to it and you get thetan. And that word is used instead of soul, spirit, ghost. We didn't use words like that. We used the word thetan. And so I am a thetan. I don't have a thetan. I am a thetan. And I have a body and I'm running this body, but that's not really what I am. And so Scientology is saying it's going to rehabilitate your spiritual self and turn you into something much, much, much more powerful. Because at the end of the day, the reason you're responsible for everything in your life is because you're the one creating it. You, me, all of us are creating the world around us. This is all our creation. And that is what I came to believe as a Scientologist. Now, I don't believe any of this anymore, just to be clear. But as a Scientologist, I embraced these ideas and I thought that they were really, really important. And I thought that we would really save the world with these ideas, that we could bring people in and we could audit them and we could train them and with L. Ron Hubbard's books and lectures, and they would become such better versions of themselves.
That's why you did it without getting paid.
That's exactly why I did
I'm
it
like,
without
how did you
getting
do
paid.
this without getting paid for 8
Yeah.
years?
I had another job. I would work full time
Okay.
at a regular day job, and then I would go to the church nights and weekends. And any time I had during the day, if I had a day off at work, I was down at the church. On the weekends, I was at the church. The only time I had off was weekend nights after 6 o'clock when the church would stop operating. I could go do my laundry, maybe go see a movie. And that was my social life, was Saturday and Sunday nights.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I was working basically 2 full-time jobs plus. So I was doing 80 hours plus a week of work. One of the jobs I'd get paid for so I could pay my rent and buy food. And the other job I wasn't getting much of anything for.
So when did the veil get lifted? When did the curtain get, it's like the Wizard of Oz, right? When you pull the curtain, you're like, you're Oz. Wait a minute.
Good question. So what happened, not only was it 8 years in Santa Barbara, but because of this concept of responsibility, when I was 25 years old, I was kind of on the ropes. I was like, man, my life is just nothing but work. And all I'm doing is sacrificing for the cause. And it started to wear me down. Like, I was a pretty energetic guy, but after 8 years of this, it was like, Jesus, what am I doing? But I really felt responsible. And this was a big thing for me. This wasn't for everybody. Not everybody in Scientology is like this, but for me, it was. I really bought into this. So instead of leaving or instead of like going off and doing something different, I doubled down and I joined the Sea Organization. And that is SEA, as in like the ocean, the Sea Organization or the Sea Org. Everything in Scientology is abbreviated.
Yeah.
So the Sea Org is a paramilitary small group of people, about 4,000 or 5,000 people, who are the core of Scientology. They are the fanatics of Scientology. They're the ones who really keep the thing going. And they wear uniforms and they have ranks and ratings and yes, sir, no, sir, how high, sir. And you can be a chief petty officer and you can be a warrant officer and you can have these ranks. And it's got its own sort of naval inspired sort of culture. Hubbard was in the Navy. He created this group in 1967 to be his most trusted, most inner circle, most hardcore Scientologist. He needed, basically, if you want to put it this way, he needed a little army and he created it. And those of us who really, really believed in Scientology would sign a billion-year symbolic contract of commitment to the Sea Org. I'm promised to give the next billion years of my existence to this group. So when I was 25 years old, rather than leave Scientology or come to my senses and go get a job, I doubled down because I thought this is the responsible thing to do. And I moved to Los Angeles and I worked for another 17 years in the big blue buildings in Los Angeles. And some of you might have seen those pictures of those blue buildings, got a big Scientology sign across the top of the building. That building is where I lived for the next 17 years. That's a dormitory building. That building's full of bedrooms. And the rest of the base is where we work. And there are service organizations on that base that deliver services. And there is a management organization on that base that manages all the churches in the Western United States. And that's where I went to work. Instead of now being an executive in Santa Barbara over all the training and auditing at that church, I was now in the position of being an executive over the entire Western United States, training and auditing. So I was now overseeing 34 churches of Scientology. That's how many there are in the West US. And I had 17 years of fun and games in the Sea Org. And it's full-time 24/7. There's no days off. There's no time off. There's no vacations. I mean, there are some. Sometimes people get a leave and they go see their parents for a couple days or they take a little vacation. But it's 24/7, 365. And you live on the base. You work on the base. You only interact with other people on the base. It's a very, very bubble world existence right in the middle of Hollywood. So you think there's cars driving by, there's people walking by, you have exposure to the outside world, but no, you're on this base and they don't let you off. On Sunday mornings, we could go to the grocery store and this is when women would get their sanitary supplies and you could get some snacks or whatever at the grocery store and do your laundry. That was Sunday morning. So we had 3 hours of that time. But otherwise, taka, 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 we are working, nose to the grindstone, work, 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 work for Scientology. And like I said, it's 24/7. So you could be asleep at 2 a.m. and somebody's knocking on your door. There's some emergency. There's something. We got to do this. And you're working again. There was one time when I was up for 5 straight days, no sleep, 5 days. That was rough. That was a tough one. And there was a period of time for about 3 years where I was imprisoned, where there was a sort of a rehabilitation program. I had gotten to the point after 8 years of the Sea Org where I was really burnt out. This kind of schedule, this kind of lifestyle, I was burned. And I wanted to leave. And I took off one night and literally walked from Hollywood, from the base down to downtown LA, and then walked to Pasadena where I'd grown up, just having a time. I was trying to just get some space and I was kind of having an episode and it wasn't good. And after about 3 days of catching up on some sleep and kind of getting myself together, I was married at this point. So my wife was also a Sea Org member. My family were not Sea Org. They were off still doing Scientology, but they were not part of this. And when you're in the Sea Org, it's a very cloistered, what happens in the Sea Org stays in the Sea Org. You do not talk about what goes on here outside. So for me to take off for 3 days, go AWOL basically, was a huge, huge thing. And I came back because I didn't want to just abandon my wife and abandon my life. This was the only life I had. I was 33 years old at this point. And I had no outside connections, no outside friends, no bank account, nothing. So it wasn't like leaving was an option anyway. And I was so conflicted. Again, that responsibility thing.
Yes.
Real big one. There were other things going on, which I'm not bringing up, but the responsibility thing was really core. So I felt obligated to go back. I felt obligated to fulfill my duty, to have integrity, to, I'm air quotes, right?
Yeah.
And I went back. And they put me in this little prison program, right? Where it's like, oh, well, you're so bad off, we're going to have to rehabilitate
You're a flight risk.
Basically, exactly. So off you go to this program. It's called the Rehabilitation Project Force, the RPF. And that was where I sort of cooled my jets for 3 years. And the Sea Org is this insane workaholic bubble world. The RPF is that on steroids because it was just hard physical labor most of the day. And by that, I mean retarring the roof in the middle of the summer. rappelling off the side of the building to patch holes in the walls of the facility. Hard work, not grounds work, hard physical labor, building furniture in a mill. We had a mill. I learned how to be a trades guy. I mean, I kind of learned how to make furniture because it's non-professionals doing this work. I watched a person lose an eye. I watched a person lose a finger doing this kind of work, right? Because we didn't have OSHA standards. That OSHA, SMOSHA, we didn't care about any of that. We were just getting the work done. Taka, taka, taka. Everything was full speed. You're either running at full speed or you're just not adequate to the task. Was kind of, I'm really downplaying the culture. It's a
You're not
workaholic.
contributing then. You're not contributing.
Yeah, it's a workaholic culture. And exactly, you have to be contributing. And the whole point of the prison program was you're a slacker, you took off, you're a bum, and we can't really trust you. And you're doing this program so you can get back in our good graces. This wasn't really for me. This was for the group. And I kowtowed to it. I complied because I didn't have any other options as I saw it. What plan B do I have here, right? There was nothing. The first month of that program, I was suicidal. I mean, it was really bad because I felt like I'd hit rock bottom. I was at the bottom of the caste system, so to speak. And I didn't see any way out except to get through this program. It's not a timed thing. There were steps I had to finish, and I had to work with somebody else to do it. So that's why it took 3 years. And I finished that program, and my eyes were a little bit more open at that point to just kind of how nuts the situation was that I was in. But at the same time, I still believe with all of my heart, since I'd been raised with this material, that despite the abuses of the group and the abusive nature of the group, which I saw was abusive, this was the only thing that was actually going to save the world. As hard as this was, sacrifices have to be made. I've got to make an omelet, break the eggs, etc. Right? This was kind of how I was now approaching this work. What choice do I have? What am I going to do? Trade stocks? Am I going to go sweep floors at McDonald's? What am I going to do? What else am I going to do that's going to be as meaningful as saving people's lives? And I still believe that that's what we were doing. I was very, very wrong about that. But I believed at the time that that's what Scientology was really all about. The contradictory hypocrisy of it didn't really come home to me yet. I wasn't there yet. I could see abuses, but I could still make all these rationalizations for it. So it took a few more years. After I finished that program, the best thing ever that could have happened to me, which is I went out on the road. I got put on a series of projects that required me to go out to churches around the Western United States to do recruitment and logistics work. Because what we were doing was there was a big international program to purchase new church buildings and renovate them in every church location. This was called the Ideal Org program because they don't call their churches churches. They call them orgs or organization. It's really a religion in name only. They don't really think of themselves religiously, and neither did I. We all kind of knew it was for legal protection. It wasn't really like we're part of a church, right? We didn't really think about it that way. And yet at the same time, still didn't think about it as a dishonest business venture either, because I was so wrapped up in
you're saving lives.
Exactly. I was so wrapped up in the idea of saving lives.
That was it.
That's right.
That's what you really believed.
As extreme as all this sounds, this is what I mean by extreme belief set, is when you're fully committed to something, you stop being able to think critically about it.
Well, you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to question anything. So you don't develop that part of you. Because if you question it, that's a threat to them.
You got it. That's
so
right.
You don't question things.
No, you do not. And you are very, very carefully trained in how to thought police yourself.
Which is the mind control we're talking about.
That's right.
So you cannot question them, or there's a price you'll pay.
You got it. And that 3-year program was the price I paid. That was the ultimate price. There were lots and lots and lots of other costs involved in this, really not even touching on right now. But ultimately, yes, you are punished and punished and punished. And it's trauma bonding because they alternate this with euphoric experiences, awe-based experiences. The auditing process, in a nutshell, the auditing process is not psychological counseling. It is covert hypnotism. The people who practice it and the people who receive it do not know that that's what they're doing. the language and framework of it is explained in a very, very different way. So Scientologists believe they are doing a process that is reaching into you and extracting your trauma from this lifetime and from your past lives, which I used to believe in, I don't anymore. And that trauma is the source of your travail, your issues, your problems. And ultimately, that trauma on a collective scale is what's responsible for war, insanity, criminality. So if we reach enough people and we audit them enough, all of that goes away. All that horrible stuff goes away, and we have a wonderful
So
world.
that's why you have to save the world.
That's why I had to save the world. Exactly. And I thought we had the way to do it. And
So
nobody
you're-
else does. I thought we had something nobody else has.
And so we
And
need to tell people about it.
exactly. And we're trying desperately to tell people about it. Nobody wants to listen, right? So it's like, we've got to try harder, try harder, try
So
harder.
all these
right?
critical thinkers are like, no thanks. You're not able to critically think in this environment.
That's right. Couldn't think about it at all. All I knew was I have my hands on the thing that mankind has needed
Mhm.
its
That
entire
will
existence.
save the world.
And we're going to save the world. So, okay,
You
so
go
that's
on
the
the road.
mindset.
And you're on the road now.
And now I'm out on the road
And you're
doing
like,
this work, and I'm away from the base. I'm away from all the group insanity.
isolation. The
I'm
isolation.
away from the social pressures. I'm driving around all over the West US. I'm crisscrossing the Western United States, and I'm
Your
getting
eyes are
so
starting
much
to
space.
open.
Oh,
Space, perspective starts to open up. Okay.
and I start meeting regular people, and they're normal. They're regular people. They're friendly. They're nice. They're warm to me. They're kind. Waitresses, people I'm interacting with in stores in Kansas, in Montana, in South Dakota, places I've never been. And I have this mindset as a Scientologist, as a hardcore Scientologist, that all these people are screwed and they're really messed up, and they are so messed up they don't even know how messed up they are, and they're mean and they're evil and there's something wrong with them and we have to save them. And instead, what I'm finding is the nicest, compassionate people, right? And I'm like, oh my God, this is not really the picture that was being painted to me in my little bubble world when I was isolated and manipulated on this base, where I was stuck and trapped in a basement sending orders to people for years and years of doing all this management work and not really being or living in the world. And so once I got an opportunity to get out and see the world a little bit more clearly through focused eyes, I started really understanding how crazy this environment was that I was in. I knew it was nuts, but I couldn't really acknowledge it, and I wasn't ready to see how nuts it was. But here was the point that broke me, was after 10 years of doubts and fence sitting and wondering and kind of rationalizing it anyway. What ended up happening was one day I was on a project out in Minneapolis, of all places, at the church there in Twin Cities. And I'd been out there for a few months. And I was doing recruitment and I was doing recovery work where I'd go and knock on the doors of people who had formerly come in and done services, but had left and weren't part of it anymore. And I was going to go back and get them back in. And this was work I had been doing for a few years, and I was pretty good at it. I could go knock on your door and start talking to you about Scientology. And if you were willing to have a talk with me about it, I could sort of rehabilitate the reasons you were doing it in the first place and get you all excited about it again and get you down there. But what I realized one day was, in order to do that work, I had to lie. And I had to tell a lot of lies. Oh, don't worry. Come on down. We're going to get you fixed up. It's all going to be good. And we're not after your money, is what I would have to tell people. And then they would come down and we would do a little fix-up thing. And then it was all about the money, right? They would be pounced upon by the salespeople. And it was ruthless. Be calling these people at 2 a.m. for their money. And I knew that was happening, and I disagreed with all that hardcore sales work. That wasn't my gig. I was doing this other thing, but I couldn't stop them. I couldn't go over to the sales guys and go, hey, you guys, you need to knock that off. That would have put me on the hot seat again. What do you mean we have to knock it off? What are you talking about, right? That's crazy town. I'd be the odd man out for trying to be civil and nice to people and not drive them to bankruptcy, because that's what we were doing. We were taking people's money hand over fist, and people would like, ugh. So I could talk a good talk and I could wrangle people back in and I could make them feel good about themselves. It just hit me one day. It was kind of one of those things where it's like an epiphany. It's like once you see it, you can't not see it anymore.
Yes.
And I just didn't see it until I did. And once I saw it, I was like, oh, wait a minute. My day, my regular day, every day, I get up in the morning and I go to work and I do my work, and I'm telling more lies than I'm telling truth in order to get done what they want me to do. This is unacceptable. I never signed up for that. I didn't want to be that. I don't want to think of myself as a liar, and I'm not. So I'm going to stop doing this. And in order to stop doing this, whoa, wait a minute. And suddenly I had to re-examine like the whole thing.
Thank you so much for listening to the Close the Chapter podcast. My hope is that you took home some actionable steps along with motivation, inspiration, and hope for making sustainable change in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, click the subscribe button to be sure to get the updated episodes every week, and share with a friend or a family member. For more information about how to get connected, visit Kristen, Kristen, Boyce, Boice.com. Thanks, and have a great day.